Dollars. So, let's talk about virtual assessment and some other things again. And if you're watching this on the day that I recorded it, it's another day of waiting in the wider world, although the election results are starting to look more certain. But it's still a time of waiting. And it's a time when a lot of people are feeling powerless. When you look at that picture, that kind of old electrical transformer, does it look powerful or does it look powerless? When you look at this squirrel, does it look powerless or powerful? But we all know what happens if you bring those two things together, right? Even if I had not known before, I learned for all time what happens when you bring together a squirrel and a transformer. One beautiful summer day when I was about 7 years old and I was watching my favorite show, Captain Kangaroo. And about halfway through the show, there was a loud popping sound and the power went out. I think we know the rest of the story. Poor squirrel. It gave its life. But in that moment, it was both powerless and powerful. And in that moment, the transformer, seemingly so powerful, was powerless, and I will never know what happened in the end of that particular episode of that show, right? Because when you bring two things together, like a squirrel and a transformer, unexpected things happen. Sometimes difficult and tragic things happen, especially for the squirrel, but also for your neighborhood 7-year-old who just wanted to watch the rest of their favorite show. So, what do we do though when we need to reclaim our own power? How do we reclaim our own power when we're feeling powerless? Well, what my mom did on that day was that she called the nice people at the electric company, and they came out eventually and they um, removed the squirrel. They fixed the transformer, and eventually we had power again, even though tragedy for me, right? No, we'll never know the outcome of that. If you ever watched Captain Kangaroo, you know what the outcome was. Mr. Moose told a joke, and some ping pong balls fell on Captain Kangaroo's head because that's what always happened every time. But I don't know what the specific joke was, right? And so for all my life, there will be this moment of wonder. But what do we do when we want to reclaim our power if we're feeling powerless? Well, the first thing that we have to do is to safely remove the squirrels. I don't know what the squirrels are for you, but for me, they're those distractions, those things that we can't actually control, that come along that seem to ruin our day. But they're kind of small. They really don't ruin our day permanently, they just make things awkward for a little while. But removing the squirrels that we can remove, that's key. We also need to clear any short circuits that are going on. And again, that's obviously a metaphor for some things that are different for each of us, but we all have our short circuits where we're just, things aren't operating quite as they should, quite as we want them to. And we can find a way to clear those as we remove the squirrels and are able to see things a little bit more clearly. We also have to balance our energy, right? There's positive energy and there's negative energy. And if there's too much negative energy, metaphorically speaking, in our lives, then it's really hard to keep those squirrels away and it's hard not to have the metaphorical short circuit. But when we focus on what we can control and we keep things in the balance that's right for us, it's remarkable what we can do. And then we can take the next right steps. I'll never know what happened in that specific episode of Captain Kangaroo, but I know what happened the day before. I know what happened the day after. I have a pretty good guess as to what I missed. And in the big picture, it really wasn't that important because what happened that day was that I decided I was going to read this book that I had been given, that I'd been meaning to read, and I loved it. And I don't even remember what book it was now, but I remember that with the sudden appearance of this, extra 35 minutes of my day, I read for a couple of hours and I didn't even know that how long it had taken to get the power back. This may happen to you when you step into the power that you do have and focus on the things that you do control and that you can control in your teaching world, in your planning world, in your assessing world, and all the other places in your world, because there's always some tiny little bit of control that we do have, some small bit of power. And when we focus on that and stop focusing on the things that we don't have control over, it's really kind of remarkable what we can do. If you're watching this on the day that I post it, you may or may not have been feeling some panic over the potential collapse of everything. And we know that sometimes a big storm will come along, and sometimes the metaphorical power poles will fall, and um, sometimes they fall on the tracks, and sometimes they fall on the road, and sometimes they fall on the house, and sometimes things are looking pretty bad. But it's important not to panic because we know that eventually it'll be fixed. Eventually, power will be restored, and eventually something different and maybe even better will emerge from that unexpected situation. So let me leave you guys with this picture and a couple of thoughts. If you're watching this on the day that I post it, it's the day before a session where we're going to prototype a new process for teachers coming together and making things that they can genuinely use. And if you're not watching this on the day before or the day of that session, don't worry, because we're going to take those prototypes and we're going to improve them and we're going to make something better. And we're going to make a thing that lets us feel a lot more like these power poles than the ones on the last slide. These are standing tall in the setting sun, doing the work that power poles are designed to do, which is to bring power to people, right? And as teachers, that's part of our job. Part of our job is to empower our students, but it's really hard to give what you don't have. It's really hard to empower somebody when you're feeling powerless. I mean, how can you do that? But when we focus on what we can control, when we come together and make things together and share those things with each other and build better things together than we can build by ourselves, then we can be something like that power pole. Just watch out for squirrels. And when those inevitable squirrels come along, don't worry, because there's that whole community there to help you get back your power, help you get back to do the thing that you're here to do. So it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be complicated. And it doesn't have to be that hard, especially when we don't try to do the work alone. A power pole without power lines, not very helpful. A power pole without a transformer on it, not so helpful. A power pole with a um, former squirrel lying nearby and nobody to come and reset it, not so helpful. But that whole community, that whole ecosystem coming together, it's amazing what we can do. So think about that and focus on that and claim the power that you have. And until we talk to each other again, while letting Sodalis.